If you can easily train someone to have control over their nervous system and you can get them off of pills that they're taking to do the same thing, that's a huge threat to these industries.
What if there was a surefire way to reduce stress, calm your nervous system, quiet your mental chatter, a way to feel more energized and focused just by making simple adjustments to something you do every day? What would that be worth to you?
Welcome to the most exciting adventure of your life. Welcome to a new way of living. Welcome to the Fierce Planet Adventures podcast. Hi, I'm Casey.
And I'm Andy. And we're on a mission to inspire and guide 1 million people to live a life of purpose, passion, and self-mastery through the 5 mountains of cutting-edge human development and mental fitness.
A former Navy special operator, he used to play with bombs for a living. Now he's focused on helping people optimize their health and performance with breathwork. Co-founder of Stasis, Josh Duntz is now partnering with experts to progress the process of healing from COVID, and is also working with veterans transitioning from military life to civilian. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me. Awesome to be here.
Yeah, very much appreciated. So just to kick things off here, what are you most excited about in your life right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think so. I just recently started this new position with Shift, which I know we're going to dive into, where we're helping military members make a career change from the military, or even when they've already in the civilian workforce. So that's an opportunity that I'm super excited about. I've been following the company for a while, and actually the CEO is a former Navy EOD guy as well. We worked together in the military, so it's awesome to be back working with him. So that's something I'm very stoked on right now.
Very cool.
Josh, for our listeners who are not familiar with EOD, would you describe what you did in the Navy?
Sure. So EOD stands for Explosive Ordnance Disposal. Easiest way to kind of think about it is we're the bomb squad for the Navy. So we were in charge of really rendering safe or disarming any sort of explosive devices. We're also like subject matter experts on chemical and biological weapons, nuclear weapons, and weapons of mass destruction as well. So those were kind of the couple different realms. And then Navy EOD specifically is also in charge of underwater mines and underwater explosives. So diving was a big part of my job as well.
Wow, that's crazy. So when I think of that, I've like, you're going into situations where the Navy needs you to disarm, I'm guessing IEDs or mines, and nerves of steel is what comes to mind for me, right? So how do you manage that kind of stress? I mean, to me, that'd be a real stressful position.
Yeah, it is. For most people, I think if you're not stressed out in those situations, is probably something a little deeper that's wrong. I think one of the biggest ways that the Navy prepares you and that I found really effective was like through intentional stress inoculation, right? So by putting yourself into these, well, kind of back up. So it's really hard to put people in those real life or death situations and training, right? Because it is such a dangerous job. So they have to figure out ways of how can I best replicate that in a safe environment. And so one of the best ways to do that is through physical stress, right? So either by, doing like a workout before you go into, trying to render safe an explosive device, or getting your heart rate really jacked up high and then trying to calm yourself down and doing like really meticulous, fine motor skill tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bunch of different ways that the Navy will prepare you for that, and that individual operators will kind of use their own means and stuff as well to help kind of just train your body to be calmer in those high stress scenarios.
Gotcha. And did you, did you deploy with like SEAL teams where you stand alone, where they called you in, or how does that configuration work?
Yeah, so I never deployed directly with SEAL teams. I did do 2 deployments where I was attached to an Army Special Forces team. So I worked mostly with the Army special forces guys. It kind of is just like luck of the draw, I guess, like depending on what team you get assigned to as an EOD tech, that'll kind of dictate who you're going to work with and where you're going to go deploy. So I worked with the Army Special Forces 7th Group guys. They're stationed down in Destin, and then like our AOR area of responsibility was all of South America is typically where we did a lot of our work.
Oh wow, okay, cool. And what took you to the Navy as opposed to other branches of the military?
Yeah, so when I left high school, I really had no intention of ever joining the military in the first place. And then life events happen, and I actually had a buddy who had joined the Navy, and he was kind of the initial one who I guess got me interested in like at least going and talking to a recruiter. That's kind of like the first step in the process. And so actually that first day when I went and talked to the recruiter, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That was something that me and some of my cousins had kind of grown up as young children, like always dreaming about. I grew up in Florida, and a lot of my family is from Pensacola, which is like the home of the Blue Angels. So they're like, kind of a trick fighter pilot group. And so every summer we would go to Pensacola and watch the Blue Angels fly. And so as a little kid, that was like, we always talked about one day that we're going to do that. So that's kind of what my intention was. I was like, all right, I'm going to join the Navy. I'm going to be a fighter pilot, and then eventually one day be a Blue Angel. And I walked in there and kind of told that to the recruiter, and he started like laughing in my face. He didn't think I was like serious, and I didn't really know what the process or like what that entailed, right, to become that level. I just dropped out of college at the time, and so that was step one. Is if you want to become a fighter pilot, you have to be an officer. To be an officer, you have to have a college degree. So I was like, okay, well, I changed my mind. I don't want to do that anymore. Like, what other options do you have? And I knew at the time I wasn't interested in kind of like, I didn't want to go be on an aircraft carrier, like be on a ship, which is, 99% of the jobs in the Navy specifically. So I was like, what else is out there? What other like special programs or kind of cool jobs are there? And he handed me like the 3 pamphlets of the special operations for the Navy, which is like SEALs, EOD, or diver, or rescue swimmer were kind of like the 4 options of like the non-traditional Navy jobs. And I just started doing a lot of research on each one of those paths, and EOD kind of struck me because we get to do a little bit of everything. So we get to shoot, we get to jump, we get to dive, we get to deal with explosives and do demo, and we get attached to all these other special forces teams too. So it was kind of really intriguing to me. I was like, I like doing a lot of stuff. Like throughout my whole life, it's been a kind of something that reoccurring theme of mine is like, I get really bored with stuff once I feel like I've tackled it or kind of like mastered that. And I was like, okay, what's next? So the idea of like, you get to kind of be a specialist in all these little things, but maybe not a master at one thing, was really intriguing to me. And that's why I eventually decided to go down the EOD path.
This episode of Fierce Planet Adventures podcast is brought to you by 5 Mountain Coaching, licensed unbeatable mind coaching, integrated accelerated vertical growth across 5 domains of cutting-edge development designed by retired Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine. Learn the big 4 skills of mental toughness and resiliency. Discover the 6 pillars of performance. Test your mettle with custom-created crucibles across all 5 domains. Visit 5mountaincoaching.com to schedule your free 1-hour unbeatable mind coaching session. That's the number 5, mountaincoaching.com. Begin your journey to becoming unbeatable today. Nice. Thank you. Okay. EOD tech to breathwork coach and business owner. How did that journey unfold?
Oh man, that's another long story. I'll try to kind of break it down. Basically, when I decided I was going to get out of the Navy, I had a couple years left in my contract at that point, but I knew I was not going to re-enlist and stay in. So I was really lucky in that I had a lot of time to kind of figure out what was going to be next for me. And I explored a ton of different paths. I, originally was gonna actually, so I got my bachelor's degree when I was on active duty. So I ended up going back to school and finishing my degree. And at first, kind of the plan was for me, and what I saw a lot of my like peers and people that had got out before me, their path that they went down was going back to school. You get an MBA, and then you kind of like either go into finance or consulting or tech. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. Like I wasn't really super into going back to school, but the MBA seemed fun because I was like really into business and like entrepreneurship at that time. I had actually started like a fitness clothing brand when I was still on active duty, and kind of did that for a little bit, started a podcast. So I was like really just trying to like figure out what I was going to be passionate about. And then at that same time was kind of when my personal like health and wellness journey was really like kicking it up a notch. Those last couple of years I was in the military, I got introduced to Wim Hof. So I was really into like the Wim Hof breathing, cold exposure. I bought my own, I had an ice, like one of those chest freezers that I converted into an ice bath in my garage. I bought a sauna. I was doing those things on a daily basis. They were a part of my like morning routine. And so that's kind of like, that was my original introduction to breath work, was the Wim Hof style stuff. And then actually another buddy of mine who I was training with in the military at the time, he was going over to screen at the development group, which was in Virginia Beach, is SEAL Team 6. And I was kind of like his training buddy, just helping him like prep to go over there for that kind of qualification process. And he was doing a lot of breathing stuff, like as warm-ups, part of his running. He was like super into like nasal breathing and this gear system, which was originally developed by some guys over at Power Speed Endurance, I believe. And now their company is called Shift Adapt. I'm trying to think, Rob Wilson and Brian McKenzie are the two guys. They would be great people to have on the podcast as well. But they were doing like a lot of their breathing techniques and kind of programs from him. And at first I was like, I don't know, man, this stuff kind of seems a little kind of quacky and like weird. And I was like in really good shape at the time. So I was like, how is like my breathe? I was like, I'm breathing fine, right? Like, you know, I'm like a very high performer, pretty solid athlete. I don't think like these breathing techniques are going to make a difference in my performance. And he was like, but I really trusted this guy. He was a D1 athlete, like in better shape than me. So I was like, okay, if he's like into it, I will at least try it for sure. And man, I noticed a huge difference almost immediately, like within the first week or two, with my training, recovery, sleep, everything I was doing. I just felt better. And I noticed like a huge difference in my running, which had always been kind of like a weak area for me, where I was just really able to control my heart rate. And I felt like I was just in more control over like my physiological state in my workouts. Whereas before I would like, you know, I'm sure I'd get through a workout, but I would be like panting, or like, I just felt like I didn't have control over my body. And as soon as I started to like focus on controlling my breath through my workouts, I just felt in control 100% of the time. And I was like, okay, this has unlocked a new kind of a level for me. And that's what started like my obsession with breathing. And from there, I just went down a rabbit hole and tried to read every book I could. And, was actually pretty shocked about how much like academic and clinical research had been done on breathing that no one was talking about. Like I was like shocked with how like entwined I was in this health and fitness community, but like no one was talking about breathing really. You know, Wim Hof was like just now, I feel like this was, you know, probably 5 years ago now. So kind of like just coming onto the scene and like making it into more of like a mainstream culture. But still like, you know, unless you were kind of in one of these very niche, like human performance sectors, no one was talking about breathing. So I was like, wow, there's like a decade plus of research around this topic and no one is talking about it. Why? So that was like where I was like, okay, there's something here. I kind of was following the trends around breathing. I was like, I think this is going to be like the next big thing in the health and wellness space. And that's kind of like where Stasis, the idea for doing that, was born. And originally, my intention was to work with like elite athletes and military operators. And then like a month after I got out of the Navy, the pandemic started. And so the whole world and landscape kind of changed. And that's how we got started to work with Mount Sinai and started to work with COVID patients, was when I was originally starting to do some of that research around stasis. I got linked up with this neuroscientist out of Mount Sinai, who's the director of innovation and rehab for them. And he was super interested in kind of the cold exposure stuff that we were doing and the breathing techniques. And so I just got kind of really lucky and got to meet him. And when the pandemic started, he ended up, and he's probably one of the major influencers around COVID-19 rehab. And so that's kind of, how we all got started. And since then, it's kind of just ballooned from there.
Wow.
Awesome.
That is really
Crazy
fascinating.
story.
Yeah. It's amazing what the COVID pandemic has done, just opening up opportunities for people to collaborate and things like this.
Yeah. It was really cool because I think had it not been the pandemic, it would have been a much different situation. But because really doctors didn't know what was going on or didn't know how to treat this, they were very open to new and kind of maybe these holistic new agey approaches that they would have shunned in the past. They were just way more open to trying anything. And we set up we did a little pilot program with Mount Sinai where I just worked individually on a one-on-one basis with a small cohort of their patients. And this was back in June of 2020. And within 2 weeks, all of these people were reporting that all of the symptoms that they were experiencing had, gotten less, and they felt better. They had more energy. They were able to walk around the block for the first time in a couple months. And so thankfully everyone at Mount Sinai had just been so open to trying this, and they were so welcoming to these new approaches and to listening to me. I didn't have any formal background in healthcare or anything like this, but I was on the phone talking to these top doctors around the country and the top rehab therapists, and it was just a really great experience for me because everyone was so nice and so willing to try these new methods. So it was super cool to see that happen.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I guess it is surprising you don't hear more about this type of work being done and how breath work can really aid and support that recovery process.
I think we are I think the pandemic is obviously terrible for everyone that's recovering from COVID and dealing with these long-term symptoms, but some positives that have come out of it is that a lot of these holistic health approaches have actually been brought up to the mainstream, and people are talking about how important breathing is and cold exposure and just stress inoculation and mental health and stuff. So I think that's been one of the huge positives that we've seen that's come out of the past couple of years of the pandemic. So
nice. Very cool.
One of the questions that popped in my mind was, as you're on this journey, transitioning into this breath work, have you come across anything that would indicate why no one was talking about this, why this wasn't a modality, or why it just wasn't paid much attention to prior?
Yeah, a couple things. One, it's most humans are an adult human. I want to say they take on average around 22,000 breaths per day. So it's something that is so normal and ingrained in us that we don't think about it as having any effect on us, because it's something you do from the day you're born till the day you die. So when you try to, especially to like someone who's a healthy athlete or like someone who thinks they're in good shape, you explain to them like, hey, if you kind of make these little minor tweaks in your breathing pattern, or how you warm up for a workout or how you cool down, it's hard for people to like get behind that and to believe that. And I was in the same boat. So I understand where they're coming from. I think that's one thing. And then the second thing is, I think it's been like probably suppressed by like pharmaceutical companies and like mainstream medicine, and even probably like some doctors and stuff out there, because it's a huge threat to those industries, right? Like if you can easily train someone to have control over their nervous system, and you can get them off of pills that they're taking to do the same thing, that's a huge threat to these industries. So it's actually something that like we're kind of going through right now, where we have some relationships set up where we're doing like some clinical studies with this, and like funding is getting blocked from us for doing this from like big pharmaceutical companies, because they have devices now on the market where like mechanical and electrical stimulation devices that will stimulate the vagus nerve, and you can do the same thing by simply kind of changing and altering your breathing patterns, and that doesn't involve something being implanted into your body. And especially for a lot of the patients that have these issues, like heart failure is another huge one. They're at a high likelihood of like infection or something going wrong when you have that surgery to implant that device. So something as simple again is like, teaching them the proper way to breathe that could have the same or even better impact is a huge threat to billion-dollar industries. So I think that probably has a large factor in it as well.
Yeah, that's very telling, right? And if they're blocking your funding, in my opinion, you've struck a nerve with them, and there's some validity to what's going on here, right?
Yeah, it's probably a good sign that that's happening, because that means you're onto something. But obviously, it's a very challenging, especially for like a young startup. Like we don't have any venture capital funding or anything like that. Like I started this company with another military friend of mine, and we've done everything by ourselves and built our website and done, we didn't have any large chunk of money coming in to help us do this. So it definitely makes things more challenging, but it's all part of the process.
Oh, for sure. Before we move on, a couple other things. So ice bath, cold exposure. You had mentioned that you had built your own ice bath. What are some of the benefits around that? Why would somebody intentionally immerse themselves in freezing cold water and then stay in there for a few minutes, 10 minutes?
Yeah. So it depends. It depends on what you are wanting to get out of that training. Like I always consider like cold exposure or heat exposure through a sauna as just another training modality. A lot of people look at it as like a recovery thing. And I think a lot of the new science is kind of like maybe veering away from the recovery specific aspect, depending on, again, what type of training are you doing and what you're looking to get out of it. Particularly with cold, for me personally, I always used it as like that stress inoculation, right? So I would do it first thing in the morning as soon as I wake up. That sucks. Like most people don't want to jump into a 36 degree pool of water at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. So it was just like that mental training for me as like, okay, you're going to wake up, you're going to do this every morning, and like, you're just going to do it. And it sucks. And then you get out and you're like, okay, anything else that comes at me today is not going to be as hard as that 30 seconds was, or whatever 3 minutes that you're staying in there. So that was like one of the main reasons I did it. There's other, like physiological things that can help with inflammation. increasing like brown fat, if you're trying to decrease body fat, has been like the two really big things that I've seen from like studies wise. And then I know now too, with like the release of neurochemicals, so norepinephrine, there's some other ones as well that are not coming to the top of my mind right now, but you can also use it, like I said, as a recovery means. Particularly, I think the new science shows that it's better for like endurance athletes, because it can hinder muscle growth if you're like a bodybuilder or someone that's trying to like put on muscle mass, because you're basically, what you're doing is you're stopping that like inflammation from happening, and that's how muscles get bigger, as they tear down, they get inflamed, and then they grow back bigger and stronger. So if you're looking, again, like if you're interested in doing it, step one would be to figure out what's the purpose of it, what's my intention behind doing that, and then depending on that, you can kind of look at different protocols, different time durations, different temperature of the water, that will all have different effects that'll help you kind of reach your goals, again, depending on what the intention of the use is.
Nice. And most certainly, and this is a tool that we use as Unbeatable Mind coaches with our clients to build the big four, the mental toughness aspect, right? And to be able to control your breath and utilize the breath work to be able to stay in there for a little bit. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. If you've been listening to our podcast or following us on socials, it's probably no surprise to you that I've been dealing with back issues for many years. And I want to take a moment just to tell you about something that I found that's helped me with my flexibility and durability and mobility. And that's called Kokoro yoga, somatic warrior training. And it's not just yoga. It also includes Tai Chi, Qigong, visualization, meditation, and breathwork practices such as Fit Warrior, Fighting Warrior, which incorporates functional fitness and some martial arts movements. And it's been just a really great way for me to maintain some flexibility and durability as I move through our challenges when we go and do Spartan races and climb mountains. So if this sounds like it's something that could help you out, check it out. The link's in the show notes.
I guess what comes up for me is, why do you think there are so many people that are just disconnected from their breath or how they breathe?
I think it's because no one has taught you how, right? Like if no one has told you that you're doing something wrong or that there's a better way to do it, you don't know. Like most people that have maybe been breathing wrong or hyperventilating their entire life, that just becomes the new norm for you, right? So it takes intervention for people to understand that they're doing something wrong and that there's a better way to do it. If you look at our ancestors thousands of years ago, breathing was something that they knew was very important, and it was something that they taught their kids how to properly do. I remember there's an expert from James Nestor's book Breath, where he talks about like Native American tribes and the women. They're talking about like young babies. When their young babies would have their mouths open and they would start breathing through their mouth, the moms would actually go up to them and just lightly pinch their lips so their mouths would close. That way they would start to breathe through their nose again. So this was something that, this was before science came out, and they had they didn't really know the benefits of it, but they knew how important breathing through your nose was. And I think that probably came from them just figuring out the anatomy, that like your nose is on your body to breathe through. Your mouth is meant to chew food and to swallow water. And so they somehow made that connection and knew how important it was, prior to science kind of proving it out for us.
Wow. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah. I think there's if you look for the tracks here, there's definitely a history with the connection of breath work in ancient times, right? So it's so we're starting to see a melding of ancient tools or philosophies with modern science bringing it together and really being able to analyze it and show the benefits.
I know James talks a lot about too. I think this is probably one of the bigger factors that we see so many people like habitually breathing through their mouths now is the modern diet, and soft food and soft palates has really kind of deconstructed our jaw shape and our jaw size. And what it's done is kind of like pushed your jaw back towards the back end of your skull, which has really pinched your nasal cavities. So it makes it harder for people to breathe through their nose. And so I think that's been, and he's shown a lot of science through this, through his book too, that's probably one of the main contributing factors is like human skulls are actually changing because our diet has changed so much and our jaw strength and jaw muscles have weakened and decreased. And so again, it's just kind of like made your actual nasal cavities smaller in diameter. So people are forced to breathe through their mouth now. And that's probably had a huge contributing factor to a lot of the modern issues we see with breathing today.
Wow, that's interesting.
That is very, I hadn't heard that before, but wow, certainly.
Yeah, that's actually why so many people have like go to an orthodontist and have braces now. Like if you look at like ancient humans, they've been able to find no evidence that like people's teeth were ever crooked before. Like, and it makes sense from the evolutionary standpoint, right? Like why the body does things for a reason. It would never make a mouth or a jaw that wasn't big enough to incorporate teeth properly into it. And again, they think just because our jaw shape has changed so much, that's actually making our teeth come in jagged and crooked. And that's why people have to get braces. And now they're showing that braces are super bad for you. So it's just like, it's one thing after the other where unfortunately, again, in modern science, we tend to put a Band-Aid on things instead of looking at the root cause and root problem and trying to go after that. So it's just kind of, another big mistake that we've come across throughout the past couple of 100 years, and hopefully we'll start to recognize things and make changes.
Absolutely. So physiologically, what shows up in someone's body? How do we know if we're not breathing correctly? How might that manifest itself?
Yeah, the biggest things I will see are kind of like our easy things that anyone can kind of test out for themselves while they're listening to this is one, the mechanics. So the kind of three pillars we focus on is your mechanics of breathing. So where in the body do you feel the initiation of your breath? Should be down in the stomach, right? With your diaphragm, that's the main breathing muscle. A lot of people will find themselves to be more upper chest breathers where they'll notice their chest or shoulders are really dominant in the breathing process. Really easy way to test is you can just put a hand on your heart and a hand on the bottom of your stomach. Whatever hand you feel rise first when you breathe in, that's where you're initiating that from. So that's one. Other part of the mechanics is what we talked about earlier, nose versus mouth. For most people, they should always be breathing through their nose. There's, certain circumstances when we're talking about like really high intensity level training, where you're going to have to breathe through your mouth just to offload the amount of carbon dioxide that your body produces at those high intensity levels. But again, for the most part, 99% of the day, all humans should be taking their inhales and exhales through their nose only. Those are the big things. And then, also the other thing is your respiration rate. So just how many breaths are you taking per minute? That's another huge thing that we see where most people are over 18 breaths per minute. Wow. So from a clinical perspective, anything over 18 is considered hyperventilation. We kind of like encourage people, you want to be somewhere around like 12 to 14. That's like a pretty reasonable number that most people should be able to shoot for. And then of course, like when you're sitting down to do like an intentional breathwork session, the science shows that 5.5 to 6.5 breaths per minute is that optimal to really increase heart rate variability and get you in that deep parasympathetic zone. zone of the nervous system. And then the third being the volume, so tidal volume. So just how much air are you actually breathing in on a breath by breath basis. Most people are over breathing, so they're taking in actually more oxygen or more carbon dioxide than the body needs. And that can have detrimental health effects on it too. So that's like the third pillar is if you really want to get granular with it, you could actually start to try to intentionally take in less air. You're going to build up carbon dioxide when you do this. So it might be uncomfortable after you breathe that way for a few minutes. Actually a good sign for people, because that, you're lowering your breathing volume at that standpoint. And that'll help build up CO2 tolerance, which is another kind of like big kind of key thing that a lot of people in the breathing space are talking about. Your CO2 is kind of like the body's stress molecule. So anytime you're doing any sort of like metabolic work, your body is always producing CO2. So the higher levels of CO2 that people can get comfortable with and maintain in their body, really the higher levels of stress that you can deal with from a physiological and like a mental standpoint too.
It's a lot going on there.
Yeah. So is there a technique that people can use to with what you just said? So if they're trying to build up their tolerance, how do you measure that? Or what does that feel like?
Yeah, so it's gonna like breath holds are a great way to do that. So just like static apnea, where you're just sitting down in a comfortable position, it's going to be different for everyone, right? Depending on kind of where their baseline is. But you could start off just by like, holding your breath for 10 seconds and kind of just repeating that over and over again. And what most people will notice is that you're going to build up this urge to breathe, right? Like when you're holding your breath, that first kind of urge to breathe, that's actually a buildup of CO2 in your system. Most people that kind of like aren't educated on this topic believe that it's actually when you hold your breath and that urge to breathe is diminish in oxygen. But really it takes for most people, like, quite a while for those oxygen levels in your body to actually drop where it would become a dangerous scenario. And a great way for people to get started with this is actually wear like a pulse oximeter on their finger that will measure your SpO2 levels. You can get your SpO2 levels really below 80%, so around 80 to 85 would be a really good area for someone to shoot for. And then, it's a really good because you can just hold your breath until your oxygen levels drop, below 90, and then just breathe normally for a few breaths, watch your SpO2 levels come back up. And then just repeat that process for a few rounds. That's a really great way. The other really great way is just to, like I said, intentionally lower your breathing volume. So instead of taking these huge breaths where you're really filling your lungs up to the max capacity, try to take in at least amount of air as possible and just breathe like that for 2 to 3 minutes. Most people will notice that urge to breathe starting to creep up. And that's when you're building that CO2 tolerance. At the point where it gets uncomfortable for most people, they can just kind of get out of that routine, breathe normal, take a couple of those big deep breaths as like a recovery breath. And again, just repeat that process for, 3 to 5 rounds. Two really kind of easy and quick ways that anyone can start to experiment with that stuff at home. And then the third thing is, all of our bodies and all of our, physiological states and mental states are so different. All three of us here have much different things going on in our bodies right now. So it's not a one size fits all approach. I always encourage people, you have to experiment with this stuff and see how your body reacts, and use data points, use a pulse oximeter. I have this Aura Ring, which is like a wearable device, or Whoop, or something that will give you a real-time heart rate variability feedback too. And so that way you can see how your nervous system is actually responding to you changing your breathing patterns in real time, because what works for me might not work for you. And so the only way to kind of figure that out is through experimentation. There's basic principles that everyone should follow, but I think after that, it's really kind of, it's an open playbook, and really you have to figure out what's going to work for your body and your specific environment as well.
Wow, that's some great stuff. Thank you.
So it sounds like a lot of physiological benefits, the physical body. Did you notice any like mental type changes when you started doing a focused breath work? What kind of deeper benefits are you getting from that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say probably like around the same time I was really diving into like a more intentional practice around the breathing was also when I was really getting into like traditional meditation as well. And for anyone that like has done meditation, they typically tend to pay a huge focus on your breath as like your anchor point. So whenever your mind starts to wander, you'll normally come back to your breath, and that's like where they want your focal point to be on. But I started like doing what I wouldn't really call traditional meditation, more just like a breathing routine. And yeah, I noticed a big difference in like, my anxiety, and I was depression states. And the biggest thing that I think I still notice today is like my ability to just notice those things, right? Whereas before I was just going through life and I thought, again, that was just like my normal state and how I operated all the time. But now, I notice it, like I can notice, or I'll pick up on like, oh, that's anxiety. Like I'm having anxiety right now. Let me note that, and like, let it go, let that thought go, and get back to like my breath. Or I'm feeling like my emotions are a little different today. Why do I feel that way? Like, what did I do yesterday that might have affected my mood today, or something like that. So I think it's just like, whenever you go into that like internal space and you forget about the external environment and you focus on your breath, you get to know your body more, and you can pick up on these things. Whereas again, most people that don't practice these things, I feel like are almost on this like automatic thing where they're just kind of like going through life and drifting through the wind. And it's a really powerful and important thing to have that internal connection with your body, because you can notice things that most people would never notice. You can pick up on these small little physiological changes. I'll notice when my breath starts to change and I'm like, oh, I'm breathing a little more rapid, like something's going on. What's going on in my environment, or what happened to change that internal state in me? And then when you have the tools and the practice, you can control that. Like you can turn that switch on and off when you want to. And that's where you really start to unlock the magic.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Similar experience when we started doing breath work and meditation. So thank you for sharing that. It's great.
Of course. Thanks.
So someone that's not, an elite athlete or that has been training physically for a long time, where would someone start if they wanted to begin training their breath or retraining their breath? Is there a good place for someone like that to just start breathing, or look up an app or the Stasis?
Yeah. I mean, there's, the great thing right now is there's like unlimited amount of resources. I feel like on this topic, if you type in like breathing on the app store, you'll find 1,000 apps. Yeah. Most of them do all the same things. They're all pretty good in my opinion. There's a really good one called Breathwork. It's like, I think it's breath, like spelled out BREATH and then WRK. I think they're kind of like the biggest breathwork app that's out there. And they have a ton of different like breathing patterns depending on what you want to do. Do you want to calm down? Do you want to energize? Those are really great. The only negative thing I have about like apps and stuff is most people, when they want to start these practice, they want to kind of, again, get away from that like external state, and get more internal. And if you're sitting there staring at a screen and following a breathing pattern, you might not be getting like as much out of it as you can. So I think the easiest way to start is like pick like the best number one thing I would say for people is like the easiest place is try to get to that 6 breaths per minute. So like a really simple 4-second inhale followed by a 6-second exhale. Go to a quiet place, close your eyes, focus on, using the diaphragm or your stomach to do most of the breathing work. Take that breath in and out through the nose. Do that for 10 minutes. And try to do that every day for 30 days. And like, that's the best place to start, in my opinion, for people that are interested. And again, if you need some more, like, a lot of people need someone to kind of be there and like tug them along. There's a ton of, breathwork coaches that you can work with, and you can do like Zoom calls and they'll walk you through a routine, or use one of those apps. Those are great if you need like cues or kind of like music in the background and stuff. So depending on like what your personal needs are, try to just find, something that fits that and get started with that.
Oh yeah, that'll be a great challenge. Is there any magic to you? I think you mentioned 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale. What's the benefit of the longer exhale, or is there a benefit?
Yeah, so they've actually been able to kind of tie your inhale and exhale to that nervous system. So whenever you inhale, you're going to kind of activate that sympathetic, which is like that fight or flight part of your nervous system. It's going to increase your heart rate a little, which is one of the direct side effects of activating the sympathetic nervous system. And then vice versa, when you exhale, it slows everything back down. It slows your heart rate, activates that calm side or that parasympathetic side of the nervous system. So typically for most people, when they're trying to do like breath work, they want to get a calm state. So we always recommend to try to keep your exhale a couple seconds longer, just because you're going to really target that calm side of the nervous system and slow everything back down. And then vice versa, if you like want to use breathing as more of a warm up before you work out, you can do the opposite and kind of increase your, take those more of like a Wim Hof style breathing routine would be like something great to do like before you're going to go on a run or before you want to work out. And then like I've kind of taken a combination approach to this, and another military buddy of mine is who kind of first introduced this to me. But we kind of we call it like, we'll go up and down the nervous system. So like I'll do like 30 rapid hyperventilation, like Wim Hof breaths, and then immediately followed that, go to like a 4-6 breathing for a couple minutes. And so basically what you're doing is you're kind of training, you're giving your body that stress inoculation, right? You're really jacking the heart rate up and getting into that fight or flight zone. And then you're bringing yourself back down. And then you're just going to repeat that over and over again. And again, what you're doing is kind of, teaching and adapting your nervous system to be more comfortable in those high stress scenarios, but then also teaching it that it's okay if I get there, because I can bring myself back down really fast out of those scenarios as well. So I think that's a really great thing for people that maybe are like they get stressed out really easily, or they notice they react to situations, unappropriately, or, they don't want to, someone pulls in front of you when you're driving, you see those like people have those crazy road rage incidents. You're like, dude, what just happened, man? They're like, I don't even know what happened. Like, I didn't think about that. Like, those are people that are just reacting to situations. And that's a pure nervous system. That's what's happening, is your nervous system is taking over your body. we always want people to respond to situations, not react.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, you have to intentionally put yourself in those high stress scenarios and get your nervous system to that state, but then also let it know that, hey, like I'm boss, like I'm in charge of this. And so even if you get to that state, I'm not going to let you take over what I actually do. I'm going to recognize that I'm in that state and I'm going to respond to it and bring myself back down. And I think that breathing style is a really good chance for people to practice that.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. I want to also touch on the work that you're doing with veterans transition. But before we move on to that, since we're talking about breath here, I want you to afford you the opportunity to talk about what you're doing with Stasis right now.
Yeah, so I kind of briefly mentioned it. So really what we've done is we've built some respiratory rehabilitation programs for people that are dealing, particularly like probably 90% of our members that we work with are people recovering from COVID or people that have like a COVID long haul symptom or long haulers. So these long-term symptoms that people are dealing with after they've recovered from the initial acute phase of COVID. But what we found out is there's a ton of other health problems and health symptoms that are outside of COVID that our programs are really beneficial for. So anyone that has any sort of autoimmune disease or anything that's like affecting their nervous system, any respiratory illnesses, obviously like asthma, COPD. We work with a lot of older patients that have like heart failure issues. And yeah, so that's what we've done. We've worked with over 10,000 people since we started.
Wow.
We give out all of our programs for free. So they can just go to our website, sign up for a free account and get access to all these programs. And then we also have, we do group classes online. So it's actually led by a breathwork instructor. And think of it as like a 30-minute yoga class, but a breathing class. So they're going to kind of walk you through a warm up, a breathing routine, and then a cool down. And then we also have, you can work with a coach on a one-on-one level too. So again, we've kind of just found like different people, like different styles that works for them. So we kind of have something for everyone. And if they're interested, they can find out more at just stasis.life is our website.
Fantastic. We'll have links in the show notes for all that to get them right there.
All right. So pun intended, I want to shift focus to what you're doing with Shift and veterans integration.
Yeah. It's a really awesome company. Like I said, the founder and the CEO, Mike Slaw, was someone who I went through EOD school with. He was actually my officer. So he was like in charge of my team that was going through EOD training. Amazing guy, such a bright guy, really one of the best leaders I ever had the chance to work with. Super smart, graduated from the Naval Academy, got his master's from Harvard, and then decided to join the Navy for some reason. I was like, dude, you don't belong here, man. Luckily he got out after his first kind of enlistment or, detail, and then started Shift. Shift's a career advancement company for military members, past and present. So we work with people that are going through their transition that are still on active duty. A couple of different programs that we offer for those candidates. One is a SkillBridge internship. So really good opportunity for all military members that are going through this transition process. And what it allows you to do is for your last 3 to 6 months of active duty service, you can go internship for a company full time and still receive all your pay and benefits from the DoD.
Wow.
So really good opportunity for our partner companies too, right? They get an intern for 3 to 6 months. They don't have to pay them. And it's a really good chance for kind of both parties. One, the company to see if this veteran is going to fit in with their culture and kind of fit in with that job. And then two, really good opportunity for a veteran to get an inside look at a company before committing to a full-time role. And they're still getting paid their full salary and benefits again for the DoD. So that's a really awesome program. I did a SkillBridge internship when I was transitioning with a tech company out in San Francisco. And that's how I kind of originally got introduced to the tech world. And that's kind of like where I decided to start Stasis too. I went out there for this internship and was like, thought that Silicon Valley was going to be some mythical place and everyone was like a genius from Harvard, and kind of realized that everyone was normal. And I was like, okay, I think I can start a company. So that's kind of like what started that process too. And then we also have a program called Navigating Next, which is for those people, again, leaving the military that might not know what they want to do next. Mm-hmm. And this is a 4-week program where they're going to get introduced to a bunch of different roles that we found veterans fit best into. So sales, customer success, HR and people operations, and then program and project management, and as well as data and engineering if you come from kind of like a hard tech background. And so they're just going to kind of get introduced to each one of those career fields, talk to people that are in those roles currently, and try to figure out the goal of that program is at the end of the 4 weeks, you'll have a better idea of where you want to go. And that kind of rolls into the next program, which is a career accelerator. So once you've figured out, hey, I'm interested in sales, you go through our sales career accelerator program, which is a deep dive into that specific industry for 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. And the goal of that program is once you graduate, you're going to be ready to interview for sales roles immediately kind of after graduating that program. So we're going to help veterans get their resumes polished up, get their LinkedIn's account set up, and really help them be able to translate their experience and skills that they learned in the military to something that a civilian employer is going to understand. So kind of getting them, get all that military jargon out of their vocabulary, get them used to like, private sector talk and kind of vocabulary. And then at the end of that 4 weeks, these candidates will get kind of highlighted on our talent tool, which is our software tool that we partner. So all of our partner companies have access to this talent tool. And under each one of those specific job functions that I mentioned, sales, customer success, project management, every 2 weeks, we have 20 new veterans being focused under those specific job functions. Mm-hmm. And then our hiring partners have direct access to those candidates and can hire military veterans right from that software piece of our talent tool. So really awesome opportunity for any companies that are looking to, increase their diversity, equity, and inclusion, or hire great military vetted talent.
Yeah, great. That's so win-win. And the path that you just described for the veteran, it seems very well put together, very inclusive, and just very powerful. Having them walk this road is something that I think has been missing for so long, to help the transition aspect from active duty to the civilian world. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it's such a needed. So over 250,000 people leave the military each year searching for their next career. So huge opportunity. Like you said, and just so many people every year that are getting out of the military that don't know what they want to do next, or just have a hard time really, like I said, translating that experience and their story to someone that has no idea what the military is or what your background was is going to understand. And that's the biggest problem that pretty much all veterans go through when they're leaving is, how do I, me, Josh, how do I tell a sales recruiter, how do I talk about how disarming bombs in the military is relevant to a sales career? And what we've found out is that there's actually a lot of overlap and a lot of skills that do translate really well into these specific job functions that veterans have. And so that's kind of the purpose of these tools and these programs is getting people comfortable telling their story and getting them to understand that even though when you first think about it, you might not be able to kind of make that transition into, bomb disposal to sales. But once you start to dive a little deeper and to realize all these little things that you did throughout your career, they do translate really well into a lot of these tech companies and high growth area jobs that we're trying to land veterans in.
Beautiful. Okay. So stasis.life. And then for the transition piece that we were just talking about, where do they go to find that information?
Yeah. So if you're a veteran or if you're a company interested in hiring veterans, you can learn more at shift.org.
Wonderful. And you're available, people can find you on LinkedIn. How about any of the other socials?
Yep, LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at Josh Duntz, just my first and last name.
Okay. Josh, is there anything that we missed that you want folks to know? We've covered a lot of stuff here.
No, I don't think so. This was a really, really awesome, engaging conversation. Thank you guys again for having me on. It was super fun to chat, and hopefully your audience will pick up a couple kind of tips and protocols that they can try out and start to experiment a little deeper with this stuff.
Absolutely. Let's just say tons of tools and great direction today. So thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, guys.
All right. Be well, and we'll talk with you soon. Friends, if you found the Fierce Planet Adventures podcast helpful, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. It helps others find our podcast.
If you screenshot your review and tag us on Instagram, we'll send you a classic Fierce Planet Adventures sticker. For your water bottle, cooler, car, send us a direct message with your mailing address on Instagram, and we'll send you that sticker right out.
Thanks for joining us, and live fiercely.